Our trustee, Rick Story, thank you for being patient. Rick, you've always been you understand. You've sat here several evenings with me.
I hope my voice holds out here, but my first day on the job, my first week, it was very interesting. We had a tax sale that week, and I got summoned to jury duty, and I attended both. But I did turn my pay from jury duty back into the trustee's office. So, but just give me an update on the taxes. Through today, we've collected almost 57% of our taxes. About a little over about $41 million. We've still got about almost $32 million to collect if we collect a full 100% by February the 28th, which is our deadline. If you look at your financials, you'll see the difference between December of this year and December last year was about $750,000 different in taxes. And the school board called me on that, and Mitch called me on that. But one thing that happened on there was an escrow company out on the West Coast that sent a tax into the county. They sent the check in the last week of December, but they didn't send us who the taxpayers were until after the first of the year. When we called the very first week of the year, called and emailed and everything, they sent it on Friday night at 5 o'clock or something like that. So that didn't show up in the December number. So it was $770,000. We short about three-quarters. So, pretty much going to wash out there. So it was nothing different in the collection. It was just, we had the money, but we didn't have the taxpayers who to give it to, so it therefore didn't show up on the system. I'll tell you about what we're doing on the investment side. This past week we put out bids, about 7 financial institutions turned the bid back in. We put out $35 million, $30 million in local banks, went to a couple of banks. We did another $5 million in treasury bills, and then we did another $5 million that came due on a certificate. We got a good rate on that to put that in the short term. So, we're trying to get everything working. It's a part of it is just lucky because over the past years we've had to you had to pay to put your money in the bank, and now they're paying a little money. So there's a little difference. So sometimes it's just timing, but staff is working hard. End of tax season is the 28th, so we'll be pretty busy hopefully in February and everything. We're looking at some things doing next year. We'd have to come back to the commission. I'm trying to check our system to see if we can pay partial payments. It's pretty easy. It's a lot easier, I think, the little lady that owes $600 in taxes to pay $50 a month or something, rather than coming up with $600 in 1 year. But first, I've got to find out will EGO, the system that we're running, the third party, will it'll handle that. And then the second, then if it can handle it, see what the details are, then it would have to be approved by the commission. But that's just some of the things we're looking at there, just to maybe give them another opportunity. It's we hear that kind of lot. They want to make a partial payment on there, but it wouldn't change come February, the end of February of that tax year. If they still owe $100 on that $100 would still be subject to the penalty on there. But at least give them an opportunity. So those are one of the things that we're looking. I don't know, what is it? It's pretty minimal. I mean, like me. I apologize. I won't repeat it unless you want me to repeat it. But anyway, everything's going well in the taxes right now. So I've got a good staff. They're working, and any way we can help you, just give us a shout. I'll entertain any questions that you may have. All right. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Rick. You're doing a super job. Thank you. All right, Mr. Mayor, is it Mr. Buckingham? You're our tax assessor.
I've got a few things. It'll only take about 2 hours and a half, and we'll get through it as quick as possible.
Just be sure and talk in the microphone there, Mr. Buckingham. We've had several requests that people want to
get closer.
Hear you
to
good?
You or to the microphone? Okay. Let me hand some of these things out. I got a little bit of information. Let's see here. What are you laughing at, Phil?
Oh, thank you.
Y'all probably can look at the front page there and agree with that mostly, and most of the time right now everybody's looking at it. I just wanted to explain a few things, I guess, about the assessor's office. I became assessor on August the 27th of 2009. Mr. Treadway resigned, and I came down from the county commission like you guys to fill that position, and of course I've run every time since then. A little bit about the assessor's office. Our responsibility is to accurately identify, list, and appraise and classify all taxable parcels in Washington County. And right now we have 65,822 as of today. Now that changes daily because land split into lots and so forth and combined, but it does change. We currently have 11 employees. The trustee, of course, does anything to do with money. We don't have absolutely nothing to do with money. He mails out the tax notices and does the collecting of the tax notices. And if anybody's fussing about their taxes, he says, go see the assessor. Right, Rick? Amen. But not only real property, the house and land, and the house and land's what we look at. 85% of the time, we're not in nobody's house. We do a mass appraisal. We measure the outside and list it as what type, what grade, average, below average. It's a complicated system that the state provides. It's called impact. It has everything figured into it as far as from Marshall Swift as what 2x4s cost, sheetrock cost, and when it goes into that system, it calculates it. We also do personal property. Now, personal property is anything to do with running a business, whether it be a copier, a desk, siding man's got ladders, scaffolds. They turn those in. We got 4,754 accounts of those, and that's this time of year. They get them in this time of year. A little bit about what y'all probably know is coming on. We're doing our reappraisal right now, our 5-year schedule. And what that last one we had was 2014. And in between times, what we do is first of all, we look at each parcel and we see if anything's changed, where you build a garage, where you build a pool, tore down a barn, it's gone now. So that's what you kind of do in between time is to get ready for reappraisal. So all parcels are listed right and correct. Why we do reappraisal is to eliminate inequities in property which is created in a change in the real estate market. And of course, this ensures fairness and equity for all the property owners. And a lot of times it changes between one reappraisal and the other, not necessarily going up. It may come down. Yours may come down, Phil's may go up, Jody's may stay roughly the same. It's based off sales. It's sales from the previous year. Like, for example, you might want to take the Ridges subdivision, and if you've got 20 sales in there from last year, you would take the mean of those 20 sales, and that's what creates the values in there. And that's how you come to it. It's not like a simple fee appraisal. You guys in banking know you have a simple fee appraisal, and the appraiser goes in and he looks at your house and bathroom and downstairs. This is not like this. This is called a mass appraisal. And I compare it, this is like paint with a big brush. It's done, we'll take the whole Ridges and it's updated like that. We take the whole Island Gate, and it's updated, whatever it may be, whatever subdivision may be. But you got to remember, this values are only for tax purposes only. It's not for what your house is worth today and so forth and so on. But that's another thing we get into. We have to have the reappraisal completed by 2026 as far as any keying or changes and everything that needs to be done. And hopefully the notices will go out to the public on 4/19. It's kind of the cutoff date for the mailing. And of course, once you get those reassessment notices, we have 2 weeks which you can come into the office and see if we have it listed wrong. We have you with an upstairs and you don't have an upstairs and so forth like that. Then after that, as same as any other year, you have the County Board of Equalization, which meets the month of June. Anyone can go to that. We make appointments the last 2 weeks of May. It's a five-member board. You come in and you explain why your values are wrong, and it's usually too high, not too low when they come in. But that kind of gives you just a quick. I know y'all. I thought you had a real big agenda tonight, and then I would have brought more stuff to keep you here longer. But it's fine. If anybody got any simple questions, I didn't bring a lot of info with me, Mr. Ford.
Yeah, I got a question.
Yeah.
When you appraise this property, each building or each barn or each shop building or each shed or whatever, if it's a farm, or I'm talking farm from my aspect, each one of those that has an impact on how much your property is appraised for too, doesn't it?
Yes.
Along with the rest of it.
Yeah. Any structure that's permanently in the ground, yard barns that pick up, be moved, they're not counted.
Well, anything you can hook a tractor to and move, you wouldn't.
Exactly.
Good idea.
That's good. Any other questions? Or you're welcome to come by the office anytime. It's a complicated system. It's not just as simple as, and we don't, that's another thing. Something sells for something, we don't chase numbers. We don't go in and raise it because you paid $500,000 for something. We had it at $325. Because if we did that, we'd be constantly juggling around. It's against the law to do that. We can't chase numbers. You know? It stays fixed for the 5-year period unless you do something to your property. You add something or something like that. But anyway, it stays fixed for that period of time. And you're welcome to come by the office. We'll dig into it deeper, try to explain better to you what's going on and so forth. But any simple questions I can answer. Mike?
I could ask more.
I seen that brand new barn you built the other day.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you about.
Thank you, Mr. Buckingham.
You're welcome.
I carry that cloud with me.
Yes, you do. Well, the director of finance is here with the fiscal report for 2019, it's the first 6 months for FY.
Where'd my guy go? Flip it there, Chris. Okay, each of you should have a, I guess we're on. Each of you should have something that looks like this that Sherry's passed out. Okay, we've got it up on the screen as well, and I'm going to try to make this somewhat brief. But first, I do want to call everyone's attention, and I'm looking around, I don't see the press, and I kind of wish they were here, but maybe the YouTube, all those thousands of people on YouTube will hear this. But what I wanted to remind you all of is we had a very important person in Washington County, a long time employee, pass away this past October, Miss Webb. We established, with the blessing of her family, we established a endowment scholarship at Northeast State in the county for Washington County students. I talked to Paul Montgomery last week, who handles the administration of that. There's something in the neighborhood of about $5,200 from about 30 individuals that have gone in to fund that. What my goal is, and the family's goal, is to drive that to a $10,000 level so it becomes a permanent endowment. So I mentioned that to remind you all, and if you're out and about and see former commissioners, let them know. And I just wish the press was here because I'd like to get those numbers up for her benefit and her memory. Okay, current 6 months review here on the financials. If you'll turn to the next page, this is where we stand as of the end of December, fund balance and cash-wise in our 7 funds. 7 technically funds, 6 because you'll hear us talk about debt service and rural debt service. In my mind, those are really one and the same. But as you can see on the first line, we began the year with $17.5 million of fund balance in the general fund. We've recorded revenue of $17.5 million for the first 6 months. We've recorded expense, not expenditures, but expense. That is actually expenditures and purchase orders. We use what's called encumbrance accounting, and that'll become kind of clear and important here in a minute, to actually record the obligations. For example, we recorded an obligation, an encumbrance, in June of 2017 to the tune of about $23 million for the Boones Creek K-8. Okay, we didn't spend that in the last month of 2017. We haven't spent it all yet. So that encumbrance still flows in there, and I'll point that difference out as we move on down the line. So our revenue over our expense for the first 6 months, our expenses were actually more than our revenue for the general fund, as you can see there, by about $5 million. That's normal. We start generating a significant amount of tax revenue in January and February. So that doesn't have me worried, or anybody else, or the trustee, so that's a normal condition. Which means our fund balance is $12.3 million at the end of December. Our cash balance is $14 million. Well, the difference is receivables, payables. In this case, we've got more payables and more payables probably on the books than receivables. And you can kind of look at how the different funds are doing. Debt service fund 151. Its cash balance and its fund balance are relatively close. The difference there is, again, a receivable from the school system. That's in the rural debt service. The $7.9 million, we will have about $7 million come into that fund during property tax season, and our next largest. We've got $1 million debt payment in April, about 7.9 in June, about $1 million in August, and then our net debt payment's not until December of the next year. So we'll pick up $7 million, and the numbers are continuing to look favorable and flowing. I don't see a huge problem with the funding of our debt service. The capital projects fund. If you'll look across there, you'll see that the fund balance is $3.5 million, not north of 10, although there is cash in that fund of $17 million. But that's to pay the contractor for the Boones Creek School, to pay for almost $700,000 worth of water lines that the commission approved, that have not been installed and paid for yet. We've still got some buses to pay for, and the South Central roof is a $670,000 bite that hasn't come out of the cash yet. They haven't performed the project down there on the South Central roof. The self-insurance fund, it's operating about where we think it is, and we're going to hopefully try to maintain about $1 million, or a little over $1.5 million in that fund going forward. We'll wait and see what comes out of employee benefits and the recommendations from our insurance guys. You want to look at this next slide just kind of shows you graphically where everything is. The blue is last year's numbers, last year's actuals. The yellow is what the budget number is, and you've got revenue on one side and expense on the other. And of course, you would expect expenses to be about half at this time of the year. Revenue's not quite there yet because of our January and February property tax collection. This is your revenue detail, and I had some notes on here. Real quick, you'll see some increases and decrease. There's an increase-decrease column right here, which is the difference between the 17 actual as of December 31st and the December 31/18 actual. I probably need Rick already had kind of touched on what was going on with on the local tax side with the property tax collection that came in at the end of December, but that didn't actually get booked until January. That takes care of most of that. You'll see other local revenue. There may be a question, well, why is that down $643,000? Our TVA impact money that we receive, which is about $545. Last year, we recorded it in other local revenue during the course of the audit. This last year, the comptroller kind of advised us that it really is part of state revenues. So that decrease is really part of that increase. And we've also, and we'll touch, if any of you have read the audit report, and we'll get to that a little later, there was one finding in the audit report that had to do with the timeliness of submitting invoices to the state for our prisoner board. We were a little negligent, or a little delinquent, not negligent, a little delinquent last year in getting those to the state of Tennessee. This year we've got all those prisoner board billings in there now, and so that there's another couple $100,000 that's kind of pushing that up. You know, and if you look at, well, okay, on the expense side, what I tend to look at here is how are we performing against budget. You know, I'm showing the difference again between FY17 and FY18 year to date, and you can see what you'll have to do the mental math on there. I didn't actually put in a difference column, but because what's really important to us is where are we in terms of what our budget number's going to be for this next year. I will touch on, you may look down here and say, okay, other general government, we're at like 61% of the budgeted expenditures. What's really left of that, a lot of that's kind of front-end loaded. For example, the 500, the payment for the TVA, the payment to the airport authority of the flow-through of the TVA money is down there, so that's a big chunk that's already hit in the actual. What we've got left to spend in other general government is our veteran services. There's about $29,000 there. We've got about a $471,000 TIF payment that we're going to make depending on how property taxes pan out, you know, through February. But that's the budget number in there for FY18. There's some money in there for First Tennessee the First Tennessee Development District, about $10K to do work keys testing to help get these kids qualified for certification under workforce readiness. This is a revenue summary. I just disregard, I mean, you can look at the first line, but we've already looked at the detail there. This is just to give you an idea of where we are in the other funds in terms of our revenues compared to our budgets. And again, you know, these percentages on the revenue side are not worrisome because we're going to catch that up as property taxes start coming in. Because property taxes flow into all those funds except for the self-insurance fund. Now, this would be probably a decent place to mention this because right here you will see that capital projects, and this is an decrease from last year's actual to this year's actual. That's down 1.9. Debt service is up $1 million. Remember, we moved 10 pennies from capital projects to debt service to pay for that bond issue that we executed back in June of 17, July 17, yeah. And this is an expense summary for the same set of funds. And I will, again, and I think I already touched on this, but on the capital projects fund, in the remaining budget right there, that consists of the health department. We've got a $400,000 health department project that's waiting on the funding for the lower level. You all have a second phase of that, which is going to do the second level tonight, which will bring us to about a $700,000 project over there in the health department. It's 100% funded by the state. So hopefully we'll move forward on that. The South Central roof is part of that remaining budget number. As I mentioned earlier, there's some technology equipment that hadn't been encumbered or spent out of that yet, and we have some money still left for the historic courthouse that hasn't been encumbered, that was in the budget line item. The budget committee sees this every month. You get it, of course, in your packet with the minutes, and as well as before action in this commission. Hopefully, you have a chance to look at it. I know that's really small up there, so if you look at the one, the printout in front of you, those are all that's a listing of all the budget amendments this commission's made this current fiscal year, okay, by fund. The bottom two lines are the ones that are before you tonight for action. But as I alluded to on the very first slide, we started off in the general fund at $17.5 million of budgeted fund balance. Of that, there was $2.2 million restricted, okay, that had already been committed for other purposes. Our fund balance policy requires us to start the year off with a restriction of 33% of our expenditures. That's the third line on there, that $13.7 million, which left you with almost $1.5 million of fund balance to do something with, okay, before you went negative. We budgeted in the operating budget, in the initial budget, you budgeted $400,000 of that, to use $400,000 of fund balance, and then as you can see going down the line, we've made an additional $500. We've budgeted that number down to $526,000. So we budgeted another $500,000 or so to bring that down to $526,000, and you've got $3,700 tonight to consider, which your projected unrestricted fund balance after tonight would be $523,000. We'll talk a little later when we go through the financials as to what happened last year when we were kind of in this position and once the audit's completed, because we'd budgeted a use of about $1.3 million of fund balance last year. And so when you see the audit statements, you'll see what actually happened there. So with that, that's all I have on the current finances for this first 6 months, and I'll entertain any questions. If not, I'll go sit down.
Mitch, it's a great report. Thank you very much. Okay. I got to say, I appreciate it. And I know the commission does as well. Thank you. Mayor?
I want to thank you to the executive team for bringing strong business principles to Stewart County government. Washington County is fortunate to have so much professional experience serving the public. So as budget season approaches, the timeline is included in the resolution that came out of the Budget Committee, which I chair. And wrapping up here, I do want to touch on a couple other important and exciting areas that you'll hear more about in the coming months. And I look forward to going through the year. Among these topics, the Blue Ribbon Task Force has identified a priority, a work-ready workforce. That's one of the areas that ties these pilots to what we can do in Washington County to be competitive. It requires education and a robust career technical training focus. Between 2015 and 2016, there was a 3.8% rise in median income in Washington County, and that's a great start. Economic development coupled with education and training will help this county continue its upward swing. I appreciate your time and attention this evening and all the time it took, but thank you for your attention.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. All right. Next item this evening is the County Attorney's Report. Mr. Sealy.
With regard to the pilots and the presentation that was made tonight, I would mention one thing that the County Attorney's Office has implemented, and you've probably seen that AgileOff software. And so that's something that's been utilized in the last year or so, that we have plugged in all the dates, the contract dates, these deadlines, and it provides really a tickler system to different county offices, because you can see, again, even internally, we have different offices, the assessor's office, the trustee's office. We have changes, obviously, in employment and the election, but this provides some continuity, again, to these different offices so that they can see when these different contract deadlines are coming up and act accordingly. So that's one of the actions that we've taken to try to help the assessor's office and the trustee's office, the mayor's office, all receive, again, different ticklers when some of these deadlines approach, so that they can act accordingly. We have received back from Mr. McCoy a proposal from Lowe's regarding the release of those restrictions. I provide that to Carl McInturf, who's been handling that transaction for us. He and I are discussing, there's a couple issues we still have with that, but I hope to get a letter back from Mr. McInturf with regard to his recommendation about how Lowe's proposed release really affects the future use of the property and the value of the property. And I hope to have that here within a day or so. So if you have any other questions, I'm glad to answer them.
Mr. Attorney, I would appreciate a copy of that, and any information you have as soon as possible, so I can go over that as quickly as I can.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Seeley. Next item is the Director of the Health Department, Director Minnick.
I just wanted to update you all. We do have a new health commissioner for the state of Tennessee. You may have seen her information in the newspaper. Her name is Dr. Lisa Piercy. She is a pediatrician who actually went to the Quillen College of Medicine here in Johnson City. And she is our new acting commissioner. Her focus areas are childhood obesity, the opioid epidemic, and chronic diseases, especially those that are related to tobacco use. So I think that will probably continue as a Department of Health moving forward, the same type of focus areas that we had before, and hope to have her visit with us sometime soon. And I can let you all know that if you would like to maybe meet her when she comes. And then other than that, I don't have anything else to report tonight, but I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Director. Any questions for Director Minnick? Seeing none, thank you. Next item is the Director of Schools report, Dr. Flannery.
Chairman, how long ago did we give an 8,300 students snow day tomorrow? I have no written report, but we'll be glad to answer questions, and I don't know what those 8,300 kids will be doing. I'd also, our Board of Education would very much like to see you before school.
Dr. Lane, I'll provide that to you as soon as we receive it from Mr. McIntyre.
Is there any questions for Dr. Flannery? Come on up, Dr. Flannery, to the podium.
Yes, ma'am.
School.
No two snow events are alike. Some of them require me to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and drive around. This one was pretty easy. The forecast stayed static, or the same, didn't change for about 18 hours. So we knew, in consultation with other superintendents in the area, that what we were going to do. You try to do it well in advance so that these families can plan on what they're going to do for child care. We have a deadline in Washington County at 5 a.m. If I don't call it by 5 a.m., we're going to roll the buses, because by 5:30 we'll have about half of our buses on the road. By 6 we'll have about all of our buses warmed up. So we start school as early as students that will get to school as early as 7:05, and some of our schools don't commence until 8:30. So it's complicated. We use 3 different services. I use the sheriff's dispatcher to help me locate any icy places around the county. Several of our bus drivers are on call. We'll call them when they're around the county. The principals let me know. So it's complicated, but more often than not, I'm up in the middle of the night driving around while everybody else is in bed. So that's part of the job. But thank you for asking. I'm glad you asked the question.
No, you're not.
Thank you, Dr. Flannery. All right. Next item is the Audit Committee report. Mayor Grandy, I think you're...
On January the 9th, the audit committee met to listen to information on the audit that ended June of 2018. The first year that ended June 2018. And they accepted the report from the comptroller, and here to just sort of present some highlights, sort of briefly, with the commissioner.
Okay. If you'll turn to, of course, those of you should have a copy of the audit report. I've got some slides, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try to get through this so y'all can get on with more important stuff. If you'll turn to page 6. I'll try not to do this. But if you'll turn to page 6 of the audit report, that is the schedule of audit findings for the current year. While I don't like having any in there, and there are very few counties and cities in this state that do have 0 audit findings, I am very pleased in the fact that last year we had 25 listed findings. This year we have 6. Okay? Our goal is to be at 0. We have had the comptroller's representatives actually tell us that that's very difficult to do. So anyway, but that's our goal. And the audit findings are, the detail of those audit findings are at the back of the report, and I'll get you to that page when we get there. Page 9 is Mayor Grandy and my letter of transmittal to you all and the citizens of Washington County. Page 12, I think is very important, at least that is a certificate of achievement and excellence in financial reporting that's provided by the Government Finance Officers Association. The accounting department, this isn't me, the accounting department, the staff, the folks of Washington County are what make this thing happen. 3 years ago, I made the effort, started the effort to apply for it. But the bones and the skeleton and most of the meat is there to earn that, and so I think it's a very notable recognition. There are very few counties in the state of Tennessee that receive a certificate of excellence and a certificate of achievement for excellence in financial reporting. Page 16 is really the most important page in this entire document, especially from a third-party standpoint, and that is the independent auditor's opinion on the financial statements. And for the umpteenth hundred year in a row, happy to report that Washington County did receive an unqualified opinion. What that means, what that's normally called, is a clean opinion. There's nothing material that would make those financial statements misleading to the users. The actual opinion that states that is on page 17 under opinions. There are 2 other letters that I'll get to towards the end, a letter on internal controls and a letter on compliance with federal standards for our federal programs, which are predominantly the nutrition programs that the schools operate. Page 20 is, in the following pages, is a discussion, our discussion of Washington County, our financial highlights, the economic condition of the county at the time, and so I'd urge you to read that at your convenience. Page 29 starts the basic financial statements, and in county government, in governmental accounting, it's a little different than what you find in normal commercial enterprises. We don't necessarily have a balance sheet and a statement of revenue, a statement of income. What you'll find here is a statement of net position, which, if you'll look at the assets are listed on page 30, the liabilities are listed on page 31, and the net position is listed on page 32. And I'd draw your attention to page 32. In that, if you'll look under primary government, we have a negative net position of $40 million. Okay, that's Washington County. If you go one column to the right, Washington County School Department, they have a positive net position of $78 million. The difference there is because all the debt is on our books, and of course the debt to fund the school buildings are on the school's books, so that creates a little bit of a discrepancy there. From day-to-day operations, from your all's perspective, we actually focus on the budgetary statements, so I'm going to skip the statement of revenues and the other. You'll find those following page 34. Well, I do want to point this out because I need to come back to this later. If you'll turn to page 37, okay, 37, and this is kind of getting back to what we were looking at a little earlier on the December financials. If you look at page 37, there's a column there which is, what this does is present the major governmental funds and the non-major funds. We have 4 major governmental funds. We have the general fund, the highway fund, debt service, and capital projects. And they're determined major by the amount of dollars that run through them. Capital projects fund, if you'll look there in the 4th column, it shows a fund balance at June 30, 2018 of $21,516,000. I won't dispute that, okay? We heard that earlier. If you will flip over to page 153, I believe. Yes, if you'll flip over to page 153, this schedule reports the revenues and the expenses in the capital projects fund on a budgetary basis. If you'll look at the 4th column, okay, you'll see that our fund balance at June 30, 2018 is $1,000,009, okay? You can look 3 columns to the left and you'll see that it's $21 million. I don't dispute that on a GAAP basis. Generally accepted accounting principles, it is $21.5 million. But from an operational standpoint, you only have $1.9 million to do anything with, okay? So, you know, and I wish Mr. Reeves had stuck around. He's never called me. He's never asked. You know, Eddie Cantor had 37 years with the county doing highway work. I've been practicing accounting for 41 years, okay? So, you know, I mean, I didn't just come to this ball game yesterday. And, you know, there are those people that will throw a hand grenade in the room and run. But anyway, if anybody needs to, you know, has any questions about the finances and about what you're hearing from the administration, please feel free to ask me. You know, so all right. Then, if you want to look at the general fund on a budgetary basis, that starts on page 42. I'm going to skip a bunch of these. Let me go ahead and just get back to the footnotes. Start on page 53. I'm not going to go into the FASB 70 or GASB 75, which means that we now record liabilities for other post-employment benefits, which was it is a $4 million liability on a GAAP financial statement, but it doesn't impact us on our budgetary statements. So anyway, and it's not, and our GAAP statements are in good shape from a bond rating standpoint. Okay, we've had Standard & Poor's and Moody's both have reviewed these financial statements, not these, but the previous years. They're very similar. You know, we've got AA2 rating. So, I mean, that is one of our strengths, is our financial viability, our financial strength in the county is one of the criteria that keeps our bond rating up. The major governmental funds are on 151. I'm going to skip past all those. The school department, there are 2 things I do need to point out. Back up to, because I said I would do it, go back to page 153, if you would. Not 153, I'm sorry. That's capital projects. Back up into the front where we need to go to, that's highway. general fund. Yeah, if you'll go back to page 45. I'm sorry. I know I'm bouncing around. I'm trying to get through this thing so y'all can get on with this. But go back to page 45. The fourth column is what we actually is our revenue and expenditures. If you look at the third line from the bottom, our net change in fund balance last year was $1.3 million. That means we added $1.3 million to our fund balances, okay? If you look over to the right, 2 columns, you'll see your final budget amounts, okay? Our final budget amount says we had planned on using, after all the amendments we made last year, we had planned on using $1.2 million of fund balance, okay? That's a $2.5 million swing, okay? We added $1.3 million to fund balance as opposed to using $1.2 million, which is a good thing, okay? Because if it goes the other way, then, you know, you're going to be really forced with some hard decisions on how to maintain your fund balance. And the reason I pointed that out, because when you go to the schools, Washington County Schools, which starts on page 159, you will see, and I'm proud of the folks over there at the school system that you know, works hard, and Brad Hale for minding the financial shop. But if you'll turn to page 163, the General Purpose School Fund, and the schools are comprised of 3 funds: General Purpose School Fund, Federal Projects Fund, and the Cafeteria Fund. And the ones that we really have, that really there's a lot of discretion over, control over, is by the school board, is the General Purpose School Fund. But you will look, if you'll look there, about almost halfway down, the excess of revenues over expenditures, they added $1.2 million to their fund balance, okay? They were projecting to use a little bit of that. So they had a little bit of a swing too. Schools are going to start it out this year, and Mr. Hale made this presentation to the Board of Education a couple of weeks ago. They've started off with the $6.1 million fund balance for FY18, or excuse me, FY19. Where it ends up at the end of 19 is yet to be determined. Sure. Probably more so on the expenditure side. Okay, if you budget $1 million and you only spend $800,000, okay, you know, and we don't budget to the nth degree. You know, and what that does is that leaves resources sitting out there that could be used for other projects. So, but no, most of that probably came about because those dollars weren't spent, not so much the revenue side. Yeah, probably a third, 2/3 maybe. I'd have to look and see that. If you want to look at starting on page 172, I'll draw your attention to that. That's miscellaneous schedules. If you want to see what our debt is outstanding and the particular issues, there's a whole set of schedules there that'll show you what our different bond issues that are outstanding or sitting on the books at right now, and what we're in our future debt payments on those as well. Let's skip that because I already talked about it. And that's still schools. Let's go to all the detail. If you want to see, and you all received the financial statements that we emailed out, which actually listed all the individual lines within each department. When I covered that a little earlier tonight, you know, I was looking at it on a summary level. You have the individual detailed lines in that last set of financials we sent. You know, what's the salary line item in the health department? You know, what's the salary line item in in the, you know, accounts and budget? Starting on page 195, you'll see all that detailed information, line item for last year, if you're interested. The budget committee will be, because that's kind of the basis for starting in the next year. Page 231 starts the statistical section, talks about our largest taxpayers, our largest employers, 10-year schedules of property tax rates, fund balances, just good information to kind of peruse, to get a feel for where Washington County has been, to help chart where it's going. Starting on page 252, is the comptroller's report on their report on internal control over financial reporting and compliance. And you'll find that report there. And again, they found no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in our internal control operations. Page 255 is their report on compliance with major federal programs. If we get a bad report there, we have the opportunity to repay the federal government a big chunk of change that you will see on pages 258 and 259 if we don't meet our compliance requirements on federal grant programs, and they'll have you repay those. A listing of last year's audit findings starts on page 260, and this year's audit findings start on page 272 with our corrective action plans. Excuse me, the findings actually start on 264, and our corrective action plans start on page 272. And with that, I went about 4 minutes over my 10. Any questions? Feel free to call. Come see me. I won't email you. Just come see me.
Thank you, Mitch. All right. Seeing no further questions for Mr. Meredith. Next item is the Beer Board. Commissioner Malone is the chairman of the Beer Board. The minutes of the Beer Board meeting are in your packet from the January 3rd meeting. Is there any questions for Commissioner Malone?
On page 23, we did meet the month of January to consider a single application, which was the application met the requirements, and it was approved. And the proprietors of the Dixie Toad invite them to join them off of 11E.
Huh.
Any questions?
No questions. Thank you, Commissioner. Next item is the Commercial, Industrial, and Agricultural Committee. Commissioner Carriger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our minutes on page 38. Action item we have is on page 48, and that is the resolution to provide $2,500 to our sponsorship of the Washington County Agricultural Partnership Appreciation Dinner. It's going to be held on the Appalachian Fairground on March the 16th. And I think we did several times last year.
Yes, we did.
That comes as a form of promotion from the CIA.
Motion made by Commissioner Carriger, seconded by Commissioner Davenport to approve the resolution. Discussion? Question's been called. Madam Clerk, if you'll switch us to the voting screen. Go ahead and cast your vote and lock it in. Madam Clerk, if you'll announce the vote. 15 yes, 0 no. Resolution passes. Right. Anything else, Commissioner Carriger?
That's all.
That's all. All right. All right. The next item is the courtroom security meeting. Our courtroom security committee minutes is in your packet from the January 10th meeting with attachments on page 68. The Employee Compensation and Benefits Committee, Commissioner McAllister.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our minutes are on page 72. And also, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to, that's some very good news I'd like to report to you about our clinic. I've asked Mr. Michelle Stewart to come there and give us a brief report on this. Again, it's in your packet. If you look on page 74, 75, she'd like to go, start on page 75. She'd like to go over some of those highlights that happened.
All right.
Good evening. It's an honor and a privilege to be here to give you some of the most exciting news I think you're going to get tonight, because it impacts our dollars, but it impacts our employees as well. 2.5 years ago, myself and the insurance broker was charged with figuring out a way to bring more benefits to the employees by maintaining less cost to their health plan. We came up with an idea of an employee health clinic. So we brought to the county commission at that point a recommendation from Care Here to operate an employee health clinic for our employees and our dependents. This is the second year of operation of that clinic. The first year I didn't bring you an annual report because it was really just a basis for us to go from. But this year's report I feel like was worthy of sharing because it is phenomenal. We're making impacts with people's lives and we're saving dollars. If you look on the front page of the report, there is a summary from the COO of Care Here, and he's also a co-founder. He stresses throughout that report the success that Washington County has had in 2 years. The utilization is some of the highest that they've ever seen in Care Here's history. Our cost containment, again, is some of the highest that they've seen. The line at the bottom of his letter, before I get into the report, something that really makes a difference for me, and he wrote, simply stated, Washington County is a shining star among all Care Here clinics across the country. You have created a culture and programs that allow employees and their families to receive high level of care at a significant cost savings to themselves and to Washington County. So as you look at your report, your first page is going to look like this, that we're going to look at, and that has the cost savings. When you look at that on the left-hand side, the cost savings for each employee is $489.48 a year. That totals over $197,000 that employees kept in their pocket instead of paying co-pays for office visits and medications. When you look at the cost savings to the county, $664,000 of claims were not placed on our health insurance, which is self-insured. Those were managed through the clinic. That cost is derivated from the market cost of a health visit in our area. A normal doctor's office in our visit is billed to our health insurance at about $211. We're providing that service at the employee health clinic for $46 a visit, thereabout. On the next page, page 2, is the financial report. This year there was a 3% cost increase for operation of the clinic. Again, that is a lot attributed to medication cost. If you'll see at the bottom, we did have a 10% cost increase on medications. The reason for that is we have people that were probably not taking medications for chronic disease management who now are getting that medication at the clinic at no cost. So we're dispensing more medicine through the clinic to address those needs of the employees and their dependents. If you look at the cost savings, when I look at cost savings, I don't factor in productivity. I want to see the real savings dollars. Productivity is hard to put a dollar amount on, but Care Here factors in a 3-hour productivity rate at what our basic employees, an average of their wages. Our productivity savings were over $171,000. So if you add that with the office visit and the medication savings, the clinic has saved Washington County over $835,000 in the last year. On the next page, the healthcare center overview. This just shows you our utilization and our appointments. Our dependent population, our spouses and dependent children, are using our clinic as much as employees are. We have 403 employees that use the clinic, 266 dependents in the last year. So our utilization is very high. Again, it's some of the highest that Care Here sees in over 200 clinics. So our people have very much so bought into the clinic and the services that they receive there. On the next page, that just breaks down the diagnosis, medications, and labs. Of the number of visits that we have, 2,500 of those visits are chronic visits. Those are people that are coming into the clinic to manage chronic disease visits. They're getting their chronic disease medicine, or they're coming there for management of those diseases. 1,267 of those visits are acute visits. Those are people that are sick, that are going into the clinic when they have sinus infection, strep throat, that kind of thing. Okay. The next page has some colorful green and blue and red on there. That shows us how we're moving risk factors. For the previous year, we had 83.13% of employees that had risk factors. In this last year, we moved 51% of people from red to green. So they were learning their risk factors and taking care of those risk factors, either through medication, moderation, exercise, that sort of thing. So this just shows us where we are from our biometric summary standpoint. Our highest things that cause us concern is BMI and weight, and then tobacco use. But we are seeing those green areas expanded. We have seen people decrease their risk factors. Over 209 people have reduced their risk factors. The one page that is a little hard to understand is the one that says risk movement. This one shows how those people are moving from risk factors based on decreasing those risk factors. If you look at the bottom of the page, the year before we had 6 people that had 9 or more risk factors. They had a risk factor for chronic disease. By using the clinic and using the coaching services and the services at the clinic, we've decreased those 9 risk factors down. So we have nobody this year that had 9 risk factors. We progressed some of those people down. You'll see levels 1 and 2 and 3. Those numbers are increasing because they're dropping from larger risk factors. They're moving from here, progressing down to lower risk factors. So when I look at this, I look at the lives that are impacted through the clinic. I look at those employees that are getting their disease management, that they're being aware of their conditions that they have that they may not have known before. Those are real differences that we're making for our employees and their dependents. Okay. There's a whole lot of information in the report. The last part is the wellness visits. We do have a very strong wellness program with the clinic. We had over 3,200 visits with a wellness coach online or on the telephone, with 536 of our people participating in that. Then the very last 2 pages are evaluations from what our people feel about the clinic. The clinic is highly recommended to the other employees by employees. Very rarely does a rating fall below 7, 8. Most of the time it's a 10 because the employees do appreciate the clinic and what they're doing there. If you have any questions about the annual report or what we're doing at the clinic and how we're making a difference in the health and the lives of employees and dependents that are on our health plan, but also saving money for the county.
If I can say, I think it's a very good news story. We'll talk about a lot behind Michelle.
Thank you.
One of our community goals is to increase our employees and
I think we're on track to do just that. We're making strides. We are. Thank you. Have a good night.
Michelle, it takes a leader to get that done. I know I was with you when we first started. A lot of us were, and it was a tough place to sell. It was a tough sell. And thank you for your leadership. I mean, you have made that a successful program indeed. Thank you. Thank you. Is there any questions for Commissioner McAllister? Seeing none? All right, next report is the Health, Education, and Welfare Committee. Commissioner Edens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our Health, Education, and Welfare Committee meetings are on page 86. All the information there from environmental reports and what we discussed on the schools. We have 3 action items, 3 resolutions. The first resolution is number 19-0103. It's to amend the fiscal year budget 2018-2019 regarding the library board grants. Grant is just for approval, county commission to accept the grant. I'm going to achieve in the form of a motion.
Motion made by Commissioner Harris, seconded by Commissioner Edens, seconded by Commissioner Lott. I don't know where that come from, Commissioner Harris. I've seen Commissioner Lott move his arm up, you know. Discussion? Question's been called. Madam Clerk, if you'll switch us to the voting screen, please. Go ahead and cast your vote and lock it in. Madam Clerk, if you'll announce the vote, 15 yes, 0 no, resolution passes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next resolution we
Thank you, Commissioner Edens. Motion by Commissioner Edens, seconded by Commissioner Davenport. Discussion? Question's been called. Madam Clerk, if you'll switch us to the voting screen. Go ahead and cast your vote and lock it in. Madam Clerk, if you'll announce the vote, 15 yes, 0 no, resolution passes.
Next resolution, resolution number 190112. This is spending, resolution authorizing the spending in the fiscal year budget from 2018 to 2019 in regards to environmental enforcement, special cleanup of property located at 1745 Highway 93, Fall Branch, Tennessee. The request is to utilize $4,300 in that in the form of a motion.
Motion made by Commissioner Edens, seconded by Commissioner Carragher. Discussion? Okay. Yes, go ahead, Commissioner. Yes.
We try to recoup that through the court process, Tom, you want to explain that?
We file a lien against their property for the amount of cleanup, and then we try to collect that, either collect the taxes or the property sold. And so we have had some success. I think we reported over the course of the environmental court, I think over the last 5 or 6 years, I believe it was $40,000 we collected back through these different ways. So we do everything we can to collect those, and we've given this person many different opportunities to clean it up themselves, but it was a meth lab on the property that they're not able to clean up. And so we're experiencing more and more of those. And so again, that's why we're to this point, to try to get that cleaned up.
I think it's a good thing because
But we are trying to collect that. We do filing against the property for any cleanup and try to recoup those costs.
Thank you, Mr. Seaver. Mr. Chairman, that concludes our report.
Let's back up here just a minute. Commissioner Ford, did you have a question, or you were calling the question? Thank you, Commissioner. All right, the question's been called. Madam Clerk, if you'll switch us to the voting screen. Let's go ahead and cast your vote and lock it in. Madam Clerk, if you announce the vote, 15 yes, 0 no, resolution passes. All right. Anything else, Commissioner Edens?
If there's any questions, that will conclude our report.
All right. Thank you. All right. On down to the Public Safety Committee report. Commissioner Wheeler.
Chairman, we, have our minutes from the January 3rd meeting.
On page 119 of the packet, the two resolutions for you to consider. The first being Resolution 19-0107. This resolution is regarding Sheriff's Office JAG grant funds being used for vest carriers and simply moving from revenue line item for law enforcement grants to the expense line item. That comes as a form of a motion from the committee.
Motion made by Commissioner Wheeler, seconded by Commissioner Malone to approve the resolution. Discussion? Question's been called. Madam Clerk, if you'll switch us to the voting screen, please. Go ahead and cast your vote and lock it in. Madam Clerk, if you'll announce the vote, 15 yes, 0 no, resolution passes.
Our second resolution is Resolution 19-0108. This resolution adopts an interlocal agreement with the City of Johnson City related to a grant that they administer and we are sub-recipients of. And that comes in the form of a motion from the committee.
Motion made by Commissioner Wheeler, seconded by Commissioner Fitzgerald to approve the resolution. Discussion? Question? Madam Clerk, if you'll switch us to the voting screen. Go ahead and cast your vote and log it in. Madam Clerk, if you'll announce the vote, 15 yes, 0 no, resolution passes.
Mr. Chairman, I would note that we have no presentation to make tonight, and that's the end of our report.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right. Next item is the Public Works Committee. Commissioner Davenport.
As you find our minutes on page 147, we have a couple of resolutions tonight. First one is 190101, resolution accepting Eden Drive as a Washington County road. That comes to you in the form of a motion.
Motion made by Commissioner Davenport, seconded by Commissioner Carriger to approve the resolution. Discussion?
Call for question.
Question's been called. Madam Clerk, if you'll switch us to the voting screen, go ahead and cast your vote and lock it in. Madam Clerk, if you'll announce the vote, 15 yes, 0 no, resolution passes.
Next resolution is resolution 190102, resolution authorizing the
Highway Department surplus on gov deals, the tractor and a roller.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Davenport, seconded by Commissioner Ford. Discussion? Question's been called. Madam Clerk, if you'll switch us to the voting screen. Go ahead and cast your vote and lock it in. Madam Clerk, if you'll announce the vote, 15 yes, 0 no, resolution passes. Anything else, Commissioner Davenport?
That's all.
All right, any questions? All right. The next item is the Rules Committee. Commissioner Tester?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a 30-page PowerPoint. We spent a lot of time talking about videoing the commission meetings and a little bit of time talking about our public comment time at commission meetings. We're going to continue that public comment discussion next meeting. So we have a resolution for you on page 158, and it is for a 6-month contract for the live streaming of the commission meetings at $200 a month. I bring that to you in form of a motion from the committee.
Motion made by Commissioner Tester, seconded by Commissioner Harris to approve the resolution. Discussion? Question's been called. Madam Clerk, if you'll switch us to the voting screen. Go ahead and cast your vote and lock it in. Madam Clerk, if you'll announce the vote, 12 yes, 3 no, resolution passes. All right, next item. Did you have anything else, Commissioner Tester?
That's it.
All right, thank you. All right, our next item is the Budget Committee report. Commissioner Wheeler.
Given the minutes are on page 166 of your packet, several resolutions indeed. The first of which is resolution 190113, amending the fiscal year budget for this year. Regarding those receipts provided by equipment and supplies to the Pantry Vet Program. That resolution is found on page 174. It's going to the form of the motion from the committee.
Motion made by Commissioner Wheeler, seconded by Commissioner Davenport to approve the resolution. Discussion?
It's been allowed you to record events and discharge payments. They're private, they're going to be public record, but they'll maintain that and then provide it as they report. Yes.
It is to record the DD forward. So it's regular or DD 14 is discharge payment. So to record that, they're also giving us like an ID card, which is worked really hard with area merchants. For biscuits and discounts.
According to what was
within the committee, she's not with us.
She had viewed it for that, she had a data processing observer fee, and that's what she used and funded out of that.
Commissioner Ford?
Most of that is for the equipment to do the, I think it's one of the scanner or something she needs to have to, I don't think it's manual, but I think it's an initial startup, and this is what we're talking, get it going, maybe a little supply.
We're talking about those data processing components, so that sounds right.
And that's a restricted fee anyway. She can only use that to purchase equipment in her office. Okay. All right, any further discussion? Question's been called. Madam Clerk, if you'll switch us to the voting screen. Go ahead and cast your vote and lock it in. Madam Clerk, if you'll announce the vote, 15 yes, 0 no, resolution passes.
Second resolution, resolution 19-0114, this is a resolution moving for fiscal year budget this year again, and payment for part-time personnel. This comes in the form of motion from the committee.
Motion made by Commissioner Wheeler, seconded by Commissioner Malone. Discussion? Question's been called. Madam Clerk, if you'll switch us to the voting screen. Go ahead and cast your vote and lock it in. Madam Clerk, if you'll announce the vote. 15 yes, 0 no, resolution passes.
The next resolution is resolution 19-0117, this is a resolution adopting a new timeline for the adoption and approval process for the coming fiscal year 2019-2020.
Motion made by Commissioner Wheeler, seconded by Commissioner England. Discussion? Question? Madam Clerk, if you'll switch us to the voting screen. Go ahead and cast your vote and lock it in. Madam Clerk, if you'll announce the vote, 15 yes, 0 no, resolution passes. Motion made by Commissioner Wheeler, seconded by Commissioner Malone to approve the resolution. Question? Discussion? Question's been called. Madam Clerk, if you'll switch us to the voting screen. Go ahead and cast your vote and lock it in. Madam Clerk, if you announce the vote, 15 yes, 0 no, resolution passes. Any questions for Commissioner Wheeler about the Budget Committee report? Seeing none. Moving on to old business, I have none to report. We do have notaries. Resolution 19-0115 is a resolution approving the election of notaries for public for appointment and reappointment for Washington County, Tennessee, found on page 187. Do I have a motion to approve the resolution? Motion made by Commissioner McAllister, seconded by Commissioner Tester. Discussion? Question's been called. Madam Clerk, if you'll switch us to the voting screen. Go ahead and cast your vote and lock it in. Madam Clerk, if you'll announce the vote, 15 yes, 0 no, resolution passes. New business, I want to thank Commissioner Jones for all she did for our retreat and workshop. She put a lot of work in that, and I was so impressed with how she just picked the ball up and carried the chairman and everybody else over the line, and we had a very productive meeting. And Commissioner Jones, I want to stand up and give you a round of applause. There was a lot of work went behind the scenes on that, and a lot of emails, and I appreciate your leadership, just stepping up and doing that, and that was awesome, and it was very productive. And you know, you feel like a lot of times on Saturday you don't know if it was all that you wanted it to be, but it was, and I appreciate you doing that, and I know the commission does. Again, speaking of a commissioner workshop, as we talked a little bit earlier today about an economic development workshop with Mark Manitoff, and maybe doing that as a full commission, or as Commissioner Carriger suggested, as a CIA workshop, and the commissioners attending that. Do y'all have any thoughts about that before we leave tonight, Commissioner McAllister?
Just one comment. I think most of us might understand TIS and pilot program. I think what we want to, from my understanding, is we want to know what the current projects are being on. That's really the thing we work on.
Okay.
The current project. Yeah. That's my answer. I don't need another gentleman to come back down and tell me another thing on TIS and pilot.
Okay. Okay. All right. Commissioner Wheeler?
Chairman, I would suggest we do this as a full commission. There's a lot of questions from all of us, and we all have to weigh in on this in the end, and I think we all need to be up to date on this.
All right. Well, I will.
I agree with that.
Okay. All right, I will work with the mayor and Mr. Miller and kind of send you all out some dates as to when we can do that, or it'd probably be an evening meeting instead of a morning. Yeah.
And just to be absolutely clear, is it that you all, I think this is what I'm getting, you all want them to help us gauge whether those pilots have been successful at achieving their aims? Is that what you're asking them to bring specifically? If we're not specific in what we're wanting, we may not get what we're hoping for.
From them before is periodically come before us.
That's
and
what I'm
give us
asking them to
updates
do.
on.
Yeah.
And we haven't had that. And we haven't. We have not had that. But to try to do it like tonight, with all the questions we have, we just need to do it in a separate setting where we're not pushed for time to achieve what we're trying to, with all the goals, understanding all of the pilots that's out there, the tips, and if they are meeting their requirements on an annual basis that they need to.
When we're looking at the data that is included.
Yeah.
You did have a slide conclusion. You want the project by project data. I just think we have to tell them explicitly, or if we're gonna be stuck with, well, we don't have that drilled down to that level for today. Does that make sense?
I think they're not giving us what we want, the figures of really how successful, how many really are employed. She's talking about a 5-year window. Pick up the telephone and call and get the
Well,
figures.
you also need verification of what they tell you too. If they say they've hired 100 employees in the past year, then, verify that with payroll information that can.
And I guess for me, the question is, how do other policymakers in Nashville or Knoxville, how do they make these decisions? Is there some, great policy-making guide to how to do this? Because, they've done math, right? So do we do the math again, or is there some, other way that we can?
I think that's where if they bring more random calls, he can answer some of that.
I might just reach out and see, yeah.
Mr. Mayor, do you have any additional comments there on that?
Question, before I have to information requested was, what was the incentive with regard to that? I've heard, number of jobs created today versus, planned jobs to be created. I've heard, non-conformance remedy exposed to the taxpayer. Are there other specific matrices that you'd like to see?
You know, Mayor, all I'd like to see is are they in compliance with the agreement? And, you know, if they're not in compliance, what's the plan to bring it into compliance? I think that's what's important to me. Are they living up to the agreement we signed with them? And I know everybody's got a different agreement, but I think it's important to know that, yeah, they are in compliance and in conformity with the agreement we signed with them.
I think one of the struggles I heard tonight was that, on the job creation one, it's not, you're making the first 40 years is 3 or 5 years.
Well, and that's fine. Put it in there so we can understand.
I think we just need to change the way we put these together. I think we put them together as a contract. So
Yes.
we ought to be able to put it together the way we want them to be. So maybe we need a yearly update, even though the target is 3 years out.
Right.
Just so everybody knows.
Well, we-
It's just a progressive. I think the big thing now is a progressive. Everybody will know where there was, like it's a 5-year contract, where we at 3 years down the road, and I know there's not, some of them's not supposed to come out till 2020, 21, but, yeah, if they're supposed to have 200 employees, at this point in the game, have they got 100 or 200, or is that? I think you're right, Mike, but if you say in the contract, you don't have to report till 2020, then they might report the gas.
It might be a nice, but it'd be a good thing to have some kind of benchmark to go by, because taxpayers deserve it.
I think if we're doing these going forward, we ought to consider doing an annual update, kind of where they are. And Mr. Harris pointed out earlier that if they get to a certain amount of capital investment, we need a way to monitor that. So I'm not really sure that we are doing that very well, or we haven't actually, we're just not sure. But there may be some value to having somebody provide, Mr. Pamela's office, somebody like that, at the meeting to answer questions about what we divided the contract.
Another thing that we might ask him to address is our role in this process and any limitations on our role in this process. Because I think it may be hard for
Yes, that's the part I would like.
I think a third party might be able to better state that than somebody who's concerned about our approval on something later on.
That's a good point, because, the state law, when I researched it, the Tennessee law dealing with pilots and IDVs to send in things annually to the comptroller's office. The 3 things that are not included is the actual capital investments made, and obviously the wages offered. Those 3 things are not required, so I don't know. It'd be nice when we do one forward, like you say, add those things to that.
Right, I think we can, because at the end of the day, it's contract, it's government, it's you, and the entity comes in. So all the drive signs off on it. And I think we can write, in pretty much what we want. But, that's the type of thing that I think is analog, really answer. And, it's important that we manage this. We have the tools. We just want to have the agreement in place. I guess the question is how we go about, putting this together, and how fast we want to do it. I mean, what do you want to do? You want to do it on night, Saturday?
I think I heard 5:30 or something, I mean. Yeah, I'd say the evening is better for most, yeah.
I'd rather be that Saturday.
And I would
as soon, I think we should try to do it sooner rather than later. Because it's all fresh in our minds right now, and also it communicates to all these people that are trying so hard that we care and we're not passing it down.
Mr. Carriger, was your CIA committee sort of collect, the consensus from the group or whatever to?
I will send emails out and ask for comments, and we'll try to compile.
All that information, I'll pass it on to you and Chairman Barrett. That's exactly. If everybody would send me emails, everything you want to see in. Green or Steve. Okay, yeah, let's let those comments come in, either the legal or the Sherry. I'll talk to her also. What does that make you get a lot of?
Just to clarify for Mr. Chair, just for the comments from the other commissioners about the request to go directly out of Ms. Stoops or Ms. Green, rather than back and forth between the commissioners, is what I would recommend. So again,
What's that again?
Again, if we're collecting information from the other commissioners, that information go directly to either Ms. Green or Ms. Stoops.
Okay.
Rather than back and forth between commissioners.
Saves me some work, I'm fine with that.
But again, the Johnson City IDB has just recently hired an attorney, Andrew Wampler. He was here earlier tonight, and I've spoken with him, and we met with him a couple of weeks ago. He's still in the process of reviewing the Johnson City IDB. So I expect that he will want to be part of, again, advising the commission where those agreements are, where the pilot agreements are that are really managed by the Johnson City IDB. So I know that he's not completed his review of those pilot agreements. So again, that may delay the schedule, but at some point we have the opportunity to review those.
I would hope we all get our comments to Sherry by next Monday. Does that sound good to everybody? Comments be coming. All right.
Just one other thing, I just got a text that says the county offices will open late tomorrow at 10 a.m. Is that because of weather or because this meeting was so long?
Yeah. Originally it's because of weather, but the latter has crept in.
Just a question.
Mr. Mayor, does that include the court bailiffs that telling me today that they needed to put a word in that they need to be off too?
We don't have bailiffs there, we got to check the film. Yeah, it does.
Doesn't include the court. Okay.
All right. Actually, I don't have to put my sign.
We're all stuck in it. Not going to have to skip where it's up right now.
All right, maybe because of rain, we're not really sure. It's the last announcement of the tax season, cutoff date time for next month's county commission meeting. It's Thursday, February 14th, 12 noon. 12 noon is the working